Hello everybody, it's Nick here, back in with another video. Why do I sound very annoyed? Well, it's because I have not been having it the past few days here. I've been going through some serious technical problems with the Hackintosh Pro, as well as something that happened earlier this morning, but that's besides the point. The main reason why I'm making this video is just to tell you about my struggles with Windows on this computer. And well, I'm just going to first get started off by telling you what exactly first started and what happened even. So to begin this off, I'm just going to give you a little bit of information on what I was doing. I was trying to do some Hackintosh stuff because this is a Mac Pro case at least. I want to try to install macOS on it. And well, the one way to do that was to install Clover bootloader into the EFI partition on the main C drive that Windows runs on. And well, I figured I'd be able to do it since it didn't seem that hard, plus it's not like it would seriously damage anything hardware-wise, and well, I was wrong, because I ended up going through hell and back trying to recover this machine from the absolute shit show it went through. Now, to first start off, I went to this YouTube video to get some sort of a better understanding of how to install Clover bootloader, since I didn't really look for any guide on the internet, because honestly I prefer YouTube videos. That's just the way how I am, alright? But basically, I look at this video, I followed the instructions step by step, and I think everything is going to go just fine. And well, that's where I was wrong. Because, well, right after I installed Clover bootloader into the EFI partition, after mounting it as a partition onto Windows, I moved the files in there, and I thought everything was fine and dandy. Well, then I had class. So then I went to class, and when I came back, I figured, well, I'm just going to put in a few commands into the command prompt just to make it so that Windows uses Clover bootloader instead of the standard EFI startup on boot. And well, I did that and then restarted my machine, and my machine booted right to the BIOS. Under the boot selection, there was nothing available. And so I figured, well, I guess my BIOS just doesn't detect Clover. So then I tried to revert the changes. But thing is, I couldn't get into Windows because the actual drive could not be recognized by the BIOS, and thus I couldn't boot the operating system. So then I figured, okay, I'll just take it out, mount it onto macOS or my Windows partition on my 13-inch, and I'll see what I can do about it. And while mounting it onto macOS, which was the first thing I did, didn't really do anything, because if you mount NTFS drives onto macOS, they will only read them as read-only, not read and write, which I needed read and write access in order to change stuff on the EFI partition specifically for Windows. And while Mac was just not allowing me to do that. So I was like, okay, plan B. I just unplug it from my computer, I plugged it into Windows, and I tried reversing the changes. And well, the one thing that I couldn't really change was changing the boot directory in the actual Windows partition, because I tried to set the boot partition back to the standard EFI shell that Windows uses to boot properly. And just as a side note, the reason why I couldn't change the directory of the EFI was because I wasn't the root user of the drive that was plugged into the computer. I actually had to be loaded into Windows to do that. When I installed Clover, I had run some commands in the command prompt telling the boot manager to use Clover to boot the operating system. And well, I tried to reverse those changes, and basically, long story short is, I couldn't do it. And so then I was like, oh, dude, you gotta be fucking kidding me. Because then I realized I have to reinstall Windows. But honestly, it wasn't that big of a deal, because I could access all of my personal user files from macOS. So I basically just copied my user folder onto my desktop on my MacBook Pro, and then I was like, okay, I'll just reinstall Windows. And so I did that, and everything was fine. And so after about 2 hours of working on this, and then finally getting to the point where I was reinstalling Windows, everything was fine. The operating system loaded up, I got all the drivers in, I started reinstalling the software and everything was fine and dandy. Mind you, this was yesterday. I'm recording this as of December 9th, 2021. So everything was fine up until around noon yesterday. And I think it was yesterday morning I reinstalled Windows for the first time. And everything was fine until around 12 p.m. when the operating system just completely froze. And at that point I was like, great, what now? what the fuck, Windows? So then it forced me to force shut down my computer by holding the power button for 10 seconds. And so I did so, rebooted it, and guess what happened next? The BIOS said,
"We cannot detect your Windows drive."
At that point, I was pretty fucking pissed, because I had not done anything to the drive. I had not tried to reinstall Clover. I had not done anything. I had done absolutely nothing to modify the drive to make it altered. I had kept things specifically vanilla, at least in Windows, to make it so that shit would work, because at this point I was getting pretty upset, because I just wanted to fucking game on my computer. So I figured, great, now I have to do this again. So then I just popped out the SSD, I threw it into the MacBook Pro, wiped it, put it back in the machine, and booted it back up with my trusty Windows installer on this flash drive here. And well, the problem here is that when I booted into the flash drive, the Windows, after going through, putting in the product key and everything, it asks you if you want to upgrade or custom install. I select custom install because I'm doing a fresh installation of Windows. Now here's the thing. I had freshly formatted it to exFAT, which is a blank partition scheme that Windows should read. However, the USB installer could not read the SSD inside of my Mac Pro. And at that point, I started shitting myself, because I was like, Christ, is my SSD completely dying now? Because, well, I hadn't really known how old this SSD was. And I basically, later in this video I'll explain it, but I found out that this SSD was manufactured around May of 2012. So almost 10 years old. But basically, I was like, okay, now I have to figure out how to fucking erase it again and try to see if Windows will read it. So I shut down the computer again, booted up Disk Utility on macOS, and redid the process, this time formatting it as FAT32, which is another standard format that Windows can read. After doing that, I mounted the drive inside of here again and rebooted. And well, nothing. At that point I was like, great, now what? I'm starting to run out of options here. So then I figured, okay, I'll try booting into Boot Camp on my 13-inch MacBook Pro, since that runs an older version of Windows 10 that will actually be able to possibly properly reformat the drive. And so I did that, and well, I plugged it back in, and still nothing. At this point, I'm like, dude, you gotta be fucking kidding me. I was really starting to lose it at this point, because I was starting to fear that my SSD might be dead. And well, it's not dead. It's working fine just now. But basically, I decided to do something different. I rebooted my 16-inch MacBook Pro and re-wiped the drive as this time a completely free blank partition. And then I popped it back in again and I just expected for it not to work, because at this point I was just like, I was kind of getting really pissed off and annoyed. So I popped it back in, rebooted, continued the setup process, and I went to the installation location. And what do you know? Rebooting my MacBook Pro and freshly re-wiping the drive for the third time worked. I reinstalled Windows, and everything was fine and dandy. I get to the desktop, install my product key, install all the drivers, I begin installing Steam, and at this point I was like, I just want to sit back, relax, and play some Minecraft. And so I installed the Minecraft launcher, I booted up Minecraft, installed Optifine, which was just beautiful. And well, everything was fine and dandy until around 5 p.m. last night, when again the operating system froze on me. And at this point I was like, ugh, dude, are you fucking kidding me? I was really fucking pissed off at this point. I was like, Windows, I have done absolutely nothing. I have not installed WinArrowTweaker. I've done nothing. It's a fresh install of Windows that's literally hours old, and you're doing this again. What the fuck is wrong? So, after just completely getting really pissed off, I figured, fuck Windows. I'm gonna try to configure the GPU pass-through on Linux. So I grabbed my Linux drive and plugged it in, and I got started with that process. And basically, for the rest of the night until 1 a.m. in the morning, I was trying to configure this GPU pass-through, and ultimately, I could not get it to work. And at this point, I was starting to lose my fucking mind. I literally thought I was going insane just because of how pissed off, annoyed, and just overall aggravated by this whole situation of me trying to just get this damn thing to work so I could just play some fucking Minecraft of all things. I couldn't get anything to work. So I just shut everything down and I went to bed. And this morning, I just figured, let's try reinstalling Windows once more on this SSD and see what the fuck happens. So basically, after deciding not to reinstall Windows, I decide I'm going to try a test here. So I open up my 16-inch MacBook Pro, I shut it down, I took my hard drive toaster, plugged in the SSD, and I booted my MacBook Pro, holding down the Option key to bring up the bootloader menu. Alright, I have the drive plugged into my hard drive toaster here, and usually it shows, oh wait, I didn't turn on, and watch this. It shows up just fine on macOS, so I'm just actually going to boot into it, and I'll show you what I mean by it will boot into macOS just fine. This is the other mouse. Now look at this, it even has my color scheme. Look at this is my wallpaper. Everything is loaded up just fine. I just need to plug in a keyboard and mouse because there's no native drivers for my trackpad. But other than that, it shows that this drive is functional, which makes me scared because I wonder if it's something else on the board, on the SATA connectors, or something else. I really hope it's not the motherboard because I really don't want to have to get another one. I then saw the EFI partition that the Windows SSD held for this computer. And I was like, okay, so the drive is detectable. That means it's possibly something else. At this point, I was like, I really hope it's not my motherboard or the BIOS, because I'll be really pissed if I have to get a new motherboard. So I just clicked return, and the operating system booted up just fine on my 16-inch MacBook Pro. Given I didn't have any mouse or keyboard drivers, I just plugged in various things to get it to work, and it worked, which meant that the operating system integrity was fine. It was something else. So I figured, okay, the operating system is now bootable and everything like that. So I then shut down the computer again, rebooted into advanced recovery mode, and I did check disk. It passed and everything was fine, which meant that the SSD and the actual Windows system integrity was fine. So then I figured, alright, and mind you, I'm doing this at 6 in the morning. And so I then decided, okay, I have it in this one slot inside of my tower here. I'm going to try doing a little switcheroo because on the far fourth slot here is my 2 terabyte hard drive that contains all of my Steam games, my downloads, my movies, pictures, everything like that is all on my 2 terabyte hard drive. And I specifically did that for situations like this where I would have to reinstall the operating system and wouldn't risk losing everything, particularly if the drive was no longer readable. So I figured it's not the biggest deal. So I just did a little switcheroo. So as you can see here, I have already performed a switcheroo. This is my 2 terabyte hard drive with all my Steam games on it, and this is the thing holding the SSD that contains the Windows operating system. The SSD used to be in the 3rd slot, and the 2 terabyte hard drive used to be in the 4th slot. So I just moved the 2 terabyte hard drive to this one, and vice versa, and that seemed to have worked. Booted up the computer. Okay, so now I have finished. I rebooted the drive into my MacBook on the floor there, and now the weirdest thing is that since it booted on my MacBook Pro just fine, it's now detected by the BIOS. So let's just, yeah, I get the boot logo, get the Windows spinny thing, and everything seems fine, and it's gonna boot just fine, but it's probably gonna shit itself immediately. So, as you can see here, I have the operating system loaded up. Just for reference, I'm running Windows 10 21H2, the latest version of Windows, and everything seems to be starting up just fine. And here we have it. The computer is working fine. Thus far, I am still very pessimistic about this. I'm just going to assume that this thing is going to shit itself once more, and I'm going to have to go through this whole process again. If I have to do this again, I'm just going to completely just get rid of this SSD and buy a whole brand new one, because I don't want to have to go through this again. But basically, that is what happened. And I have been completely aggravated, annoyed, and I just want to relax, man. I've just been stressed about this because I haven't been able to edit my videos. I haven't been able to play games with friends. I've been stressing over this for at least 12 hours now. And I am just tired beyond belief of doing this. And I just... Sorry, I did take a moment there. I'm still pretty infuriated about everything. And I swear, if this happens again, I'm gonna probably reach out on Twitter to Microsoft and be like, "Yo, what the hell?" But that's only if I feel like it. I probably won't do it. Okay, so this is an update 2 days later. The Hackintosh Pro is running perfectly fine. I've had no problems with the drive or crashing or anything like that. So honest to God, I don't know what the problem was earlier, but if it happens again, you bet I'm gonna make a video on this. But anyway, that is the story of my computer problems and trying to figure out what the fuck was going on with my SSD. This is Nick Dalton here. If you liked what you saw, go ahead and subscribe, leave a like, and just leave a comment. I would appreciate it if you do. And for those of you who have subscribed, I will see you all in the next video. Bye bye.